welcome to members of the public and welcome to our colleagues from MIA who are doing our governance review. So our meetings, board meetings are being observed, which I hope will be very helpful as they learn more about us and help us with our review. I have apologies for absence from Sandra Caldwell and Kate Lancaster. And we may be joined later by Katie Kapanas on the screen. Any declarations of interest that we have not received previously, we'll take them as read. Thank you. And then the minutes of the last meeting held in public, which was on the 10th of September, which does feel like almost an eon ago, doesn't it? So go through them page by page, page 7. Sorry, page 1 of these, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9. Everyone can check the minutes. Thank you. In case join us. Welcome. Matters arising and the action log. Elaine.
Okay, thank you. So the first item was to invite the Chair of the Safeguarding Board to present their annual report. The annual report is actually going through Tynwald. It's going to be laid at Tynwald this month and then will be presented to our next public meeting in February, where the Chair of the Safeguarding Board will join us.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
The next item, 4724, this is to do with falls, and there was a report that was presented to the QSE committee, and the QSE will continue to monitor the position of falls. So we'll close that action, Chair. The next item, 4724, is a deep dive into safeguarding, and that's on the agenda for later in this meeting. The next two items are not due until February and March 2025. The next item, 8024, the People Committee to consider what support was available to colleagues suffering workplace trauma. That's been added to the People Committee agenda, and that will be discussed at the next meeting.
That's really helpful.
And the final action was for the medical examiners. Unfortunately, we tried to accommodate them for this meeting, and they weren't able to attend. So we'll schedule them for the meeting in February.
That's really helpful because that's a relatively new development and one that we obviously want to support. But I think having an understanding of where they are and their development will be really helpful. So that will be February. Thank you. Any comments on that? I've not been notified of any other business. So we'll move on to our visitors, hearing from Dr. Sen, who's going to talk to us around the asthma and allergy pathway. So thank you, you're very welcome.
Thank you. Okay. Shall I do it sitting? I just want to stand somehow.
You're welcome to do whatever you feel comfortable with.
Okay. Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. I'm here with Karen, who's we've formed a working group to look at the allergy and asthma service, pediatric allergy and asthma locally. We've got Donna, who's one of our part of the school health team. She's a trained allergy nurse, so we're hoping that she'll be included in our service. So what I'm going to do is give you an overview of what the situation is at the moment and what we are planning to do in the new year. Some of you probably know a bit about it, but I just want to make sure that everybody is aware what the plan is. Can I have the next slide, please? So just to put things in perspective, about 2 million people in the UK live with food allergy. The numbers in the Isle of Man is quite similar in percentage terms. In fact, it might be higher in terms of a percentage. There are about 10 to 20 deaths only due to food allergy in the UK. Fortunately, we haven't had a death on the island, but there has been a patient who has died across who were traveled, and this service review was sort of prompted by a CDOP review. These are three children which I have just highlighted who have died of food allergy. 15-year-old Natasha, she suffered anaphylaxis on board a British Airways flight, which was flying from Heathrow. She bought a pret-a-manger baguette, which had sesame in it. It wasn't labeled. She took it on the plane, ate it on the plane. She had an anaphylaxis episode. Her dad gave her 2 EpiPen injections. In spite of that, she died in a hospital in France while she was on the phone to mom in London, saying goodbye. So pretty sad story, really. They have actually created their own charity called the Natasha Charity, which is based on giving allergy education, supporting education and training. Then we had a 13-year-old Karanveer in London. There was cheese flicked at him by another pupil who was 15-year-old, one of his schoolmates, but he wasn't aware of his allergies in full. He reacted just by that touch on the skin of the cheese because he had milk allergy. We've had a couple of cases on the island, haven't we?
Yeah.
Of similar cases happening where children have thrown things at other children who have allergies. His mum actually posted that picture there. You can see in intensive care just before he passed away. More recently, in 2022, we have 13-year-old Hannah, who was allergic to milk, dairy, fish, and eggs. And she went to Costa Coffee. Mum ordered a drink. She specifically said she's got milk allergy, give her soya milk, and it was served with cow's milk. So again, she had a severe reaction and died following the episode. So, I mean, I don't want to shock you with this slide, but I thought this gives perspective about the importance of having an allergy anaphylaxis service locally. Next slide, please. So currently, just to give the current service, I was appointed in March to specifically build an allergy and anaphylaxis and an asthma service. I have fortunately managed to get a permanent post now, which I started in September, so I'm not going anywhere for a while. I've started my own clinics this month, so I have 3 pediatric clinics. I've just seen my first patient in clinic today, and most of my clinic workload is more than 50% of patients are allergy, and those who are in primary care will know that the burden is going up day by day. We have lots of new referrals. We almost have 4 or 5 referrals every week with pediatric allergy. So that would need to be sustained by a proper service. William has been around for donkey's years, I say, 20 years, I think. He's run the service single-handedly, kind of thing. Though all my colleagues see patients in the clinic, just looking at his workload and all the other I've covered all my colleagues during this period before I started my own clinics. We have almost 1/4 of the whole clinic will have some form of allergy, whether it's food, asthma, or eczema. There's a lot of skin eczema around. So there is a big burden of allergy and anaphylaxis on the island. Next slide, please. So this slide I'll have Karen to go through because this is based on what Donna is doing at the moment and then what we are hoping that we'll bring her into our service.
Hi there. So Donna obviously can't be with us today, so I said I'd present on her behalf. So the mainstay of Donna's current role is to provide education in schools, and that's the cornerstone of allergy and anaphylaxis management. So currently Donna will go into school and she offers a service where she will go and provide education to teachers and to old staff in schools and to nursery staff as well. We've actually opened it up now to staff who are in youth clubs and university at the NSC as well, because this is really important that we get the coverage. So the main areas that will be covered in that training are allergy avoidance, because ultimately that will be the thing that we would want to try and educate people to do. We don't want people to be having anaphylaxis unnecessarily, but obviously allergy avoidance isn't always possible. So that would be the main thing that we would teach. We would also look for symptom recognition, because obviously, thankfully, anaphylaxis isn't something that we come across very frequently, so people don't know how to recognise that it's happening. So we'd make sure that people were aware of that. Then we'd also look at crisis management, so obviously how to deal with an anaphylaxis, because seconds and minutes matter when there's an anaphylaxis happening. So we'd make sure that staff were aware of that, and also personalise it and individualise what each individual child in their school, what their symptoms are. And then we would give teachers the opportunity to use one of these EpiPen demo pens, because obviously they are quite, people are quite frightened of them. So this gives people the opportunity to be able to practice on themselves, practice on each other without them being live, because they are very easy to give. So that would be the main thing that we would do. So Donna provides this. We do specify that it needs to be done on an annual basis at the moment, but obviously we are working with Goodwill of Education to allow us in. We have had, as you can see from the figures, we've had really good uptake in the school year from September 23 to August of this year. Donna's managed to train 1,442. That's comprised of 39 sessions in schools and 4 in nurseries and 11 in other venues, so it's been really well received. The nurseries, there's 43 nurseries on the island and 40 of them have allowed us in. And of the primary schools, 30 out of the 35, and all of the secondary schools have allowed us in, so that's really positive. And of the staff that have attended, they've completed evaluation forms and have said that they would highly recommend it to their colleagues to be able to attend that training as well. We've had 2 anaphylaxis in schools over the last year, and they have been managed really well. And obviously we haven't got one of these cases on our hands because the staff have attended the training, and we've managed to avert a child death in the last 2 years. So I think that's really, really important for us to be aware of, that this is something that we're managing to get out there and avoid children coming to any harm.
Excellent. So these are the challenges at the moment. So to start with diagnosis, if we had a pediatric dedicated allergy clinic that would be offering a skin prick testing service, which we at the moment we do blood tests, and blood tests are not always accurate. The patient I saw this morning has some blood tests which have shown allergies to things that he already eats, but that's because he already has other allergies, and that pushes up the numbers in the blood. But when you do skin tests, it's more specific for a specific allergen. So that's something we want to start. Donna's trained to do the testing, so we don't need to retrain anybody or put anybody through training. So we're just trying to get her into the service so she can, act as an allergy nurse. Education and training, we are doing pretty well actually, but we need to continue. We probably need some resources where we need other, single-handedly she's been doing so much. So if her role moves to the hospital, then there'll be probably additional somebody to be trained to do it. The MDT team to run the allergy clinic would consult, would consist of a consultant, allergy specialist nurse. I put the expected PA allocation and what we need. A pediatric dietitian, because at the moment we only have dietitians where we refer to dietetics and they arrange another clinic. If we want to run a clinic as a whole, we need all of them in the same place. The governance is obviously very important. We don't at the moment have a pediatric allergy database of all the patients we have on the island. We've already started now compiling names and, so build up a list. The guidelines are quite outdated. The last school guideline we looked at is from 2019. So we are a good 5 years on. So we have started doing that. The audits are important. I have run a pediatric allergy anaphylaxis audit after I've joined. One of our medical students did it for us. And what it showed was we're giving away the pens prescribed from different places, A&E, hospital, primary care, but we're not training them. So less than 20% got their training at the time of prescription. So there's no point of a mom having a pen without any training. So there's so that training at the point of prescription is very important, which we have started doing. Today I went through the training with the mom who came with a little child. We go through it when they come to clinic. Now this is the way. This is the last point is where this presentation is relevant, where we need some funding for the specialist nurse to move into her new role. It's not that we are recruiting a new person, so we're trying to use our own resources to bring people in. The pediatric dietetic team are very keen to help us, but they need some extra time. And the skin prick testing kit, I've approached Malcolm with Henry Nobles, and they already have a lot of money to give us. So hopefully we'll have some charity funding there to help us with the equipment. So I don't think it's a big ask, but it's just getting everybody in place before we run a proper allergy clinic. Next slide. So this is the working group that we set up. Karen has been very enthusiastic about getting us together and meeting on a regular basis. We do a monthly meeting. We've got updates every month. We met with school as well. So we have a school rep the other day. She's in charge of guidelines, etc. So we have to work with school. We have Ruth, who's dietetic service manager, and Hannah is one of the dietitians who came to our meeting last time. She's very keen to do some allergy. They have some allergies set up. So they're going to help with the clinic. Obviously, we are led with Linda, our care group manager, so who has, made the forward plan. Next slide, please. So this is our plan. What I want is a one-stop shop. The patient comes in with his problems, his or her problems. We do the testing. We make a diagnosis. The nurse sees the patient, does the training, and the dietitian is there standby to give some dietetic advice. The patient goes home with a diagnosis and a plan. And therefore, they don't have to come to separate clinics to see a nurse or a dietitian, and it's all done in one session. So that's the MDT. We hope we will be able to start early 2025. We are updating the guidelines, as I said before. We're using national guidelines. Some of the local guidelines, school ones, we're going to update as well. There is education for schools, which will carry on. There is a legal policy in the UK, which we should be following here, about spare pens in schools, which means every school can have their own pens. Instead of relying on the patient or the families to give them the pens, they can have their own pen, every single school, and they can use for any patient if they have a problem. So that's something we are promoting now. The plan is to have a drop-in session for allergy pen training, because parents tend to forget once we teach them. And if we have a drop-in session, they can walk in, or even if it's online, they can just go in and get the training so that they can be refreshed every year. So that's a very important thing. I trained in the Northwest, so I'm linked with the Northwest Allergy Network, which is based in Alderhay and Manchester Children's Hospital. So what we are doing is liaising with them to make this one of their peripheral clinics. So any difficult cases or complicated cases, we can discuss with them. Having a local service obviously prevent a lot of unnecessary referrals as well. So, that would be cost saving in a way, if you don't get the whole family across for so many appointments. And eventually, I think when we get the service going, we have new developments. Now, I've put just one of them, which is a treatment for peanut allergy. Some of you might be aware, but we have this medicine, I would say, but it's actually just peanut powder. It doesn't cost peanuts, but it is a peanut powder in a tablet form. And we give an increasing dose over a period of time, and they're able to tolerate peanuts. So imagine somebody just being treated for peanut allergy. They don't have to carry their pen. And a mom the other day, she said, once this happens, I'll get back some of my brain, because for 15 years, she's just been so conscious of things. So I think that's on the horizon. We have one child with severe asthma who's benefited from desensitization. So she's on a treatment which is monitored from Alderhay, and she used to come into hospital with asthma every week. And since I've come in, she's been only 3 times over the last 9 months. So which is an amazing transformation. She's obviously going to transition to adult care now, but we've saved so many admissions for her. Next slide, please. That's, I want to finish with this slide. This is a quote from Tanya, who's Natasha's mother. I'll let you read it. But she's the girl who was on the plane. And unfortunately, Petamanger or any of the big companies, they have their whole team, they were never penalized for it. All they did is, we didn't know, they changed a few of their labeling, but never prosecuted. So they have developed this charity which is helping fund a lot of, you've got some funding.
Well, Donna, they're contributing towards Donna's Masters in Allergy, so that's really
Donna's really keen, and she's doing a master's degree from Southampton University in Allergy, and it's part funded by the Natasha Foundation. That's it.
Thank
you.
Thank
Any
you.
questions?
Well, goodness, thank you. What a fantastic example of the best possible integrated care. Really, really impressive. Everybody always comes to board meetings asking for money, and that's absolutely fine. But I do think that what you're demonstrating is how we develop a service that really benefits whole families, not just the individual, kids able to get education, not being admitted multiple times,
Exactly.
not being reliant on mum's bag with whatever medicines in it. Having used EpiPens, it is really scary when you actually have to do that.
Do it.
So I think it's fantastic that you've reached out to so many people in schools. I mean, that's really impressive.
I mean, what Donna does is amazing, and when parents come to clinic and they have shown me they're doing it properly, I'm happy.
Yeah.
Well, exactly,
Because,
and that sort of multi-level approach is really
Because
important.
I was just teaching some junior doctors, and we went through a room of 20 doctors, and guess how many got it right?
Yeah.
1.
So I was just going to ask that about obviously the education of the public and their families is hugely important, and teachers, but within the health settings, GP surgeries, that sort of thing, are we offering education there?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
The plan is to do
practice nurses as well.
she's going to work with the practice, and I'm planning a study day for the GPs. I did mention to Oliver actually one day of doing a half-day study day on their Wednesdays when they're free, and do it in a golf course. Give them a round of golf at the end.
Okay, we don't want to hear about that. So the other point I'd like to make just to the board is that this is not in our mandate. This is work that Manx Care has taken on through the individual efforts of clinicians wanting to improve the health of the people of the Isle of Man. So these are the sort of arguments that we need to make as we talk about the more difficult elements of financial balance. So your messages, not only clinically and socially, are really important, but for us as a board to reflect on when we're having some of the more gritty conversations about what does Manx Care do for the people of the Isle of Man and how much does it cost. So your points are very well made. I'll open it up just briefly for other people to comment and question, but I'm sure we'll be watching your service with great interest. Sarah, then Sheila.
Just to say thank you very much. You came to QSE a couple of weeks ago, and we had the privilege of being able to go through this in quite a lot of detail and ask quite a lot of questions. This is life-saving work.
Definitely.
And I think any of us who have had experience of friends and family with allergies, it is utterly terrifying. And I think we need to be very clear about the life, the risk to life that is associated with some of these very serious allergies. And, you know, it breaks my heart that a child in a playground thinks it's hilarious to throw cheese at someone, and then that ends up with them dying. So, you know, as I said at QSE, I'm delighted to see that educational element of what you're doing, both outside the hospital and within it. And I think it's really important, and well done for securing that additional funding from Natasha's foundation. Thank you.
Sheila then Miriam.
Thank you so much. I think this is a brilliant example of really good, clinically led, multidisciplinary team working that is absolutely making a huge impact on the island in such an integrated way, linking in with the schools. I'm really interested in the funding of this and how, from a charitable perspective, we could certainly look at pump-firing monies for individual posts or supporting posts. So I think we can certainly look at that. I'm the chief nurse, so I absolutely would work with you on that. I know we've been able to do that in the past. And just it's critical.
Yeah.
It is critical, and I think this is the thing, Chair, isn't it, with the mandate and whatnot, and we can't do without the service, and this is the way we want to go in the future. One stop, just go once, get everything you need from all the experts in the room. It's far more effective, it's higher quality, and it's cheaper.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Miriam, then we'll close with Nigel.
Hi, I'm Miriam, I'm the Director for People. Again, I want to echo my colleagues' comments of what an important service it is and how impressive it is how you've built it up from nothing. I'm just interested from a wider perspective, do you find that children with allergies tend to have other comorbidities, and are there implications for our other services?
Yeah, I mean, the commoners, because we have something called the allergic march. So basically it's eczema when you're a baby, little baby, moves on to your nasal problems, which is rhinitis. And then the third step is asthma. So they're all linked together. And sometimes there's an allergic basis to it. So asthma is a big burden on the island as well. We have had asthma deaths. Reading up, doing a presentation, there's one of the celebrities who died at home. Was it Plaggett?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, he was on The Apprentice, wasn't he?
The Apprentice, and he was found dead at home because he didn't have the proper inhalers or didn't ask for help. So asthma is, I think, the biggest link, and which causes deaths. So we want children with asthma properly evaluated from the allergy point of view. So if we can look at it from the allergy point of view, then that helps with the asthma. There are asthma admissions through winter. We have a few on the ward now, and they'll keep coming every week. But if we can manage their allergies, then we manage their asthma episodes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. We spend far too much time at this board talking about money.
Yeah.
It's absolutely delightful to celebrate the centre of excellence that you and your team are creating. So thank you for that. And I echo all the sentiments that have been spoken around the board. I think we have a fiduciary duty to shout this kind of thing from the rooftop, actually, and I think it's absolutely brilliant. My question is, in your work so far, have you discovered any objective evidence surrounding an increased incidence of any particular allergies on the Isle of Man due to our sort of unique situation of being an island, small community in the middle of the Irish Sea, and therefore separated from the UK across? I was not going to say.
Yeah. So I was working in the Lake District previously, so I haven't moved very far across the water really. But the main thing that I notice is we have a lot of aeroallergens. I know we are a biosphere, so but that doesn't help with allergy because we have high levels of pollen. So tree pollen, grass pollen. This is so. I find a lot of our children will have pollen allergy. There is house dust mite. The child I saw this morning has high levels of house dust mite allergy, which is, though not a dusty place, but the mites love damp environments. So they live in rooms and carpets, and so that's one of the top ones on the island. Food, we are quite good. I did meet up with is it Claire Barber. She's in charge of the food. So her son unfortunately has allergies, so she came to my clinic. We were talking about the food labeling and food on the island, and she said a lot of work needs to be done on that as well to ensure food safety, because obviously we have so many restaurants, etc. So we need to make sure that labeling is up to scratch. There are guidelines in the UK, European guidelines we follow, but some of them are not followed here at the moment. So I was going to meet up with her, and she said, "Come and talk to me, and we'll talk about food," which is great.
Excellent, thank you. Well, thank you very much. It's a really lovely way to start our board meeting. And please send congratulations to Donna and all your colleagues. And we look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. So rather more prosaically, moving on to my chair's report. Obviously, since our last board, we have a change in minister. So I spent a lot of time with meeting our political leaders. Teresa, Nigel and I were invited to the Council of Ministers meeting prior to the change of Health Minister, which was a really interesting and robust discussion around financial and budget setting and our revenue streams. I think it was extremely helpful to be invited. Teresa's expertise, knowledge, and the fact that we're able to see how Council Minister discussions are influenced and progress was really helpful. Teresa had hosted our new minister, who is the first minister, Ms. Cannon. She hosted him here 2 days after he took over the health system in Wales. He was vocal about meeting social care as well, which was extremely helpful, that recognition that we are an integrated health and care system. And obviously we are working very closely with him and colleagues in the Department of Health. Of course, also have to get used to a new minister, particularly around budgetary issues, but also around how we frame the mandate for next year and the changes that the exec team with their exec colleagues in the Department of Health have been leading on to make the mandate not just a realistic, ambitious piece of work, but also linked into the reality of budget, the cost, which isn't necessarily the budget, cost of things, and the aspiration to deliver a combined strategic vision for health and social care. So there's a lot of very, very detailed work going on at the moment. And we'll come on to the financial discussions for this year later on in the agenda. The other piece of work that I've been involved in directly has been the appointment of 2 executive colleagues, replacement for our chief medical director, executive medical director, and director of people and workforce. We have made appointments. Once they've been confirmed, we will obviously be able to circulate the details of that. But I want to publicly pay tribute in this board to both Miriam and Marina, whose names get muddled in my head, but the 2 M's who have done a stalwart job as interims, not only in their support to the board, but in their support outwards in the organisation. And I want to minute that publicly, please. The other people that I went to visit were the integrated sexual health service, because they're moving. They're moving out of Nobles into the community setting. And it's rare as a chair that you get to meet a happier bunch of people in their work, because they're moving from a space that provides them with 2 consulting rooms to a space that provides them with 5 consulting rooms. At the last board, we heard from colleagues from the transgender community and how much they valued the sexual health services here. And it's absolutely clear meeting the staff how incredibly positive they are. and also how they are doing exactly what Dr. Sen and his colleagues are doing. They are living the integrated care model that we talk about. So it was really pleasant, not only to have lunch with them, but also to hear their enthusiasm. And I encourage colleagues on the NED side of the board to visit them when they move into their new community setting. I will pause there and hand over to Teresa if there are no questions or comments on the last month's activity for me. Teresa, over to you for Horizon Scan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the usual Horizon Scan, and I really want to just pull out some, I guess, really key and important developments and progress that has been made since the last board. So on the 29th of November, Manx Care will formally launch the baby loss certificate. And this is a really important development which will provide bereaved parents who have lost a baby before 24 weeks with the opportunity to recognise their loss more formally. And to mark that occasion, we are going to look at a walk in conjunction with SAN's charitable organisation who work really closely with us. The organisation has always placed huge importance on our strategic partnerships and pathways with the North West. As Dr. Sen talked about the importance of that broader network, we continue to develop those partnerships, which is sort of being led across the organisation, but particularly led by Oliver in that lead. So formal strategic partnerships in place, of which we are really starting to feel the benefits. So 2 new consultant-based services, a visiting consultant coming to the island in orthopaedics, which is preventing patients having to travel off-island for outpatients. So specialist clinics working with our own existing teams, and 2 new services started in orthopaedics, which is really positive. I also just want to reference the very positive peer review we had from the Cheshire and Mersey Major Trauma Network, looking at sort of our urgent and emergency pathway and our critical care services. This is incredibly important for the island, and the feedback that we have had from that visit on the 9th of October is excellent. It's certainly a very, very positive report in comparison when they visited 2 years ago. So I do need to just formally thank the teams who have been involved in that, the anaesthetic team, the ED team, Mark Cox as General Manager, James Watson, Stuart and the nurses involved who have absolutely made sure, and Joe Standish, who have absolutely made sure that we have positioned ourselves in the best place possible to get a very positive peer review. Just moving on, we've talked about sexual health, and I think this is again the opportunity for that service to really provide an integrated sexual health service, and the type of contemporary service that we have all aspired to and that they've been working for. And I would agree, they're an absolute pleasure, that team, to work with. They are full of passion and enthusiasm, incredibly patient focused, looking forward to the future, and I can see that new premise which gives them all the opportunity to deliver services in the way they would wish. I think it's really important that we acknowledge that within the safeguarding arena, we have one of our safeguarding practitioners who has now qualified as an independent domestic abuse advisor and in IDFA. A very important role from the island. I do just want to, and I will bring in exec colleagues, because I know I'd want to give Tim the opportunity to just give an update on Summer Hillview particularly, but I wanted just to come back to winter planning. So we ordinarily would want to have invested resource and perhaps be able to do more in terms of our preparation for winter. But I do want to assure the board that for this year particularly, we will have the full benefit of a number of initiatives which we started just over a year ago, So the intermediate care service is now fully functioning and having a huge benefit across Manx care. Definitely looking to step people out of hospital at the soonest opportunity, and also is preventing some admissions. We also have the ambulatory assessment and treatment units, and clinical navigation and the developments in the ambulance service, which were funded from transformation about 18 months ago. So we are seeing the full effect of that, and I think that is work which probably goes unnoticed, but actually what we see that is in a reduced length of stay in the hospital setting, and particularly a result, a reduction in patients who are described as delayed transfers of care. So people who are ready to leave hospital but who remain in hospital. And I think a very important statistic is when Manx Care started, we usually had between 30 and 40 delayed transfers of care in the hospital, often for a number of months, and a couple of cases which stretch beyond that. Now on a day-to-day basis, we usually hover between 3 and 4. And I think that is a really important marker of both good quality care, but that we are using the very precious resource we have in hospital most effectively, and we are absolutely supporting people to return home and into their communities appropriately when they're medically ready, but in an optimal way. So we are putting a lot of effort into the winter planning with the resourcing that we do have, but I did want to make that point. The final point I would want to make, and I think this is important in the context of Chair, what you said about that relationship with the politicians. We have started a programme of inviting MHKs in for briefings with the exec, and this is an opportunity to ensure they understand our work, and they have an opportunity to ask questions outside of the formal questions which go through Tynwald. But this is seeking to engage with them so they understand what we're doing, the work we're doing, and why we do some of the things that we do. So we had a very positive first session with politicians on the 30th of September, and we're going to schedule those regular sessions on a quarterly basis. Happy to take any questions on the report. I just want to give Tim the opportunity to maybe talk about social care and Summer Hillview particularly.
Thank you, through the Chair. Yeah, just very briefly, so colleagues will be aware that we are making a transition from Yatta Bay to Summer Hillview. We're at the very late stages of that transition, and it's complex and difficult work. I'm sure we've heard many times around this table, but it's absolutely accurate. We are aiming to start the transition of residents from the week beginning the 25th of November. The setting is now registered, and LB Care, who are the incoming provider, are well engaged and working through all of the work that needs to be done to get the setting ready. And at the appropriate moment, we'll be communicating, obviously, with all members, both non-execs and execs, about an opening. The final thing I would say is it's been tough. The partnership work has been tough, but actually largely positive, ultimately. I think what I'd say is lots of turning the handle to get things done, which nobody will be surprised about. But enormous thanks to those who've been involved in it so far. The reason I say we're at the late stage is things can always go wrong in projects, and but we've got various mitigations in place should that happen. Probably the thing we're most concerned about is making sure that residents move safely from one home to the other, and having moved into the autumn, we're conscious of issues around ill health and so on, to make sure that residents. But shout out for Sam Murphy, who's one of our service managers, done an excellent job. Every resident has a detailed care plan and assessment to support that transition, and that will remain the priority as we move forward. So thank you for your support, and hopefully good news next time we meet, Chair.
Just for the note, how many residents are we moving?
So 60 in total. There are 45 residential beds and 15 nursing beds. Of the 60 beds, there are 51 residents moving. I think that's the right number. I'll get that checked, Chair. But and we're moving them in groups of about 5.
Thank you. That is logistically the challenge. So
Piece of work.
and recognising
Yeah.
route to pressures as well. So
Yeah.
thank you. That's a really helpful update. Any questions or comments for Teresa or Tim? I'd just like to ask a question about the orthopaedic services. My impression is that we have really exemplar services in orthopaedics. I mean, we had, I think the hip replacement service was first or second in the Royal College of Surgeons England's audit, and they do seem to be very proactive in thinking differently. And I'm just, how do they share that with the wider surgical and process type specialties? And also, how ambitious are we at this, bringing colleagues with specific expertise from Liverpool, Manchester, or wherever in England or Scotland over to us? Because I think we heard before, I'm not sure if it was a public or seminar, whatever, about endoscopy services. How ambitious are we, and will that be both cost effective and quality improving? And what's the impact on our clinicians here in terms of their service load?
Very interesting. Well, we have quite a long history of visiting services here, and so we have visiting consultants pretty much in every care group. The visiting services that were reported from within orthopaedics is essentially a restarting of that relationship with Wrightington Hospital that was severed during COVID.
Okay.
So this is primarily them sending their very specialist surgeons that look at so Prof Monger does the top of the arm, Mr Tolwalker does the bottom of the arm, Professor Mason is a lower limb surgeon. We probably have less of a visiting service within general surgery. I think that's because mainly we consume most of our services here, so the majority of general surgical services are delivered on island, maybe with the exception of upper GI, and there are other visiting services in development. So I think there will be some comms going out today or tomorrow just around a visiting service that we've had up and running with Liverpool Women's Hospital, which sees their gynae oncology surgeon, Miss Taylor, come over on a monthly basis to do her gynae oncology surgery. We're looking to set up a similar arrangement within gynae for Urogynae, because that is an area of gap area that we have. From a cost effectiveness point of view, when we whatever way you look at it, whatever the commissioning arrangement is, so whether we pay the trust for the consultant's time or we pay the trust for essentially the equivalent of seeing those patients locally, we still see a saving because we don't pay for the travel. But from a cost effectiveness point of view, we tend to find that actually paying for the consultant's time is more cost effective when you compare it with the tariff costs, and that tends to be the way that we run. But that is on the basis that we manage all of the appointments, the letters, etc. And what we're hoping, once these, particularly within orthopaedics, once those clinics have established, essentially we'll be able to manage those waiting lists ourselves, because rather than referring to Wrightington and then to refer back, we will refer to the specialists here and develop that outpatient waiting list here, which is advantageous for the trust, because it means that once the patient is listed for surgery, it's that point that they drop onto their 18-week pathway. So it makes their waiting times look better, because we are taking a portion of that waiting time for ourselves. So Teresa mentioned at the beginning of her report around the importance of the strategic partnerships, and it's very much those strategic partnership relationships that we have that is the kind of the foundation of these. Heard last week around the new arrangements, the group arrangements for Liverpool, and I think those individual trusts coming together under a group, which is the kind of plan of action for them over the next couple of years, will definitely strengthen those relationships, because it means that we can have essentially a single relationship with a big provider rather than lots of relationships with smaller providers. But it means that we can then filter that down to individual care groups having the kind of equivalent relationship with their equivalents across Liverpool. So yeah, I think it's the start of lots of things to come.
It's really helpful, and I would encourage executives and clinical director level people to look at what opportunities there are to expand our training offer as well. Because traditionally we've not had middle grade residents because of the lack of training opportunities. But I think the way the training restructuring is already beginning to happen in the UK, this is a real opportunity for us to think differently, as well as upskilling or confirming skills of our existing staff, grade level staff. So I really want to see that knitted into sort of quality improvement approach. Thank you. Any comments for Teresa? No, thank you very much. We come on to the committee reports now, starting with the People Committee in September. Sarah, anything to escalate from that?
There are 3 things in the report to escalate, two around data and 1 around pay. It's all written there. I think Sheila and I have started to have a discussion around if we are unable to source this data and have been asking for it for such a very long time, what are our alternatives? And what is it that we really do believe are the most important things to be recording and monitoring? And what are the things that if we can't get it, we can find an alternative route to get it? So I think rather than constantly hitting our head against a brick wall because we can't access the thing that the document says that we want to access, how else can we provide assurance to the board around that? And then the other items are just for information in terms of what assurance we did receive. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a comment from me about mandatory training. So there isn't a time frame, but where are we with mandatory training? Because it is a safety quality issue, but it's also about our engagement with staff if they feel that they don't have to do it.
So where we are with mandatory training is we now have the 10 core mandatory training modules agreed formally with staff side and through the exec, and they are the ones that apply to all staff members. There is a really detailed project piece of work being undertaken by the Workforce and Culture team in terms of unpicking some of the role-specific training around various staff groups across the organisation, and there is a clear project plan that we're going through the People Committee next week in relation to that. As Sarah's already highlighted, one of the real issues we have with mandatory training is finding that data, and we are in the process of having really detailed conversations about the Rebuild, Relearn value to try and get that data from there.
Exactly.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. Teresa, you want to comment?
Yes, or it's on a sort of a related point, because I think I understand we need to continue to focus on what does role-specific training look like, but at what point do we think we will be able to have the validated, accurate position around mandatory training for the core 10, which is obviously what regulators look like, and you know, have we got any dates for when we would have that? Because I know we're being requested that information externally,
Yes.
As we speak, and being able to have at least some assurance that those numbers are accurate is going to be incredibly important.
Yeah, so you're quite right, Teresa. So on the second point first, the request for the data externally, in answer to the point that Sheila and Sarah were talking about, is what we've had to do is take the data as it is and then manually validate it across the care groups and then issue it to the external person. So we have done that piece of work on the core 10. There is I won't bore the board with the details, but there is a challenging issue in relation to the e-learn vanning system and the rebuild of it to enable us to pull information on a care group basis. So what I've done is instructed the workforce and culture team to use some of their resource to actually do that rebuild. And there is a discussion being had tomorrow, I believe, in the diary formally to get a time frame around that, and I'll bring that to people committee next week.
Okay, thank you. I think it's really important because it's,
Yes.
I presume it's rated in terms of risk, so thank you. Yes, D&I, Katie's not here, so I think the focus of the D&I committee's work to update the board is on the Manx care record. We had an excellent meeting of the board to go through the paper in detail with a number of options. I think what impressed us as board members was the do nothing option, just continue with what we have now in terms of digital support, is actually more costly, both in the short, medium and long term, than investing in a new process. So that paper was sent to the Department of Health, because that was where the commission came from, and has been well received, I think it's fair to say. Have we had an update on where that is heading at the moment?
So Chair, we understand that there's a meeting, I think it's next week, scheduled for the new Minister to review that with healthcare and treasury colleagues.
As well, one of the both advantages and disadvantages of changing ministers is that we get a second bite of this. But I just want to give thanks to the Digital Committee, because this was a very big piece of work that was very appropriately commissioned, asked all the right questions, and displayed the options in a way in which even people like me could clearly understand what we were being asked to make decisions on. So I think I'd just like to minute our thanks for that, and we await a discussion, which no doubt will be quite detailed with Department of Health colleagues as we get the results from that briefing. So thank you. Audit committee, Nigel?
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. Yeah, audit committee, it doesn't always evoke excitement when you talk about audit, but I would actually challenge that, because I would say that the audit committee meets every 2 months. I think over the last year and 18 months, in times of relative tension, we've developed an excellent relationship with our shared service alliance partners within government, the Internal Audit Advisory Department. And I'm very pleased about that. And I think there's great mutual respect between those two services. You think about marking homework. I see it very much as a journey to improvement of quality. And the fact that we have an external alliance partner looking at specific projects that we talk about and agree, so that we gain the best bang for our buck in terms of management results. They're very receptive, very good to work with, and I wanted to mention that, particularly at this public board meeting, because I think it's a shared service that is working extremely well, and we enjoy that very much. I think the big picture subjects that were talked about at the last audit meeting centered around risk and alignment. And I think that's important because there's a big crossover with our Finance and Performance Committee as well, in terms of, one, our attitude to risk. And I think there's a big picture paper on that at the moment in terms of what kind of risk we as a board are prepared to look at, because that may have financial consequences. And clearly the audit committee is looking at specific risks and how we manage those risks, particularly in terms of transferring of risks out of Manx care to people who rightfully should own those risks. And in the time of financial tension that we face, where we rely on shared services, particularly the estates and particularly OHR, I think there is a wind of desire to recognise where those risks should rightfully lie, because there is an element of Manx care bearing the responsibilities for those risks without necessarily having the power to control them. So I think the more we can get that on the table, and the more we can identify those and analytically look at them objective properly, without saying, over to you, I think it's very important at this time of reset and at this time of financial tension that we get that. And I'm really delighted at the way in which the audit committee has been approaching that of late.
Thank you, that's incredibly helpful. I think it's a really important point that you make about where does responsibility and where does accountability sit. And there are some blurred boundaries, inevitably, as we're only in our 4th year. So I think the more clarity we get around that, we have input from our governance review team that will look at that as well. There is Margaret Pratt's report to the Department of Health around that element of where accountability sits. So I think it's really important that the audit committee looks at this and keeps pushing those conversations. So thank you.
It is an assurance committee, Wendy, so it's perhaps a little different to what people would perceive to be a classic audit committee in financial terms. But I think what's really interesting is that, there is this rolling program of visits and deep dives that is going on behind the scenes, marking our homework, checking that we are doing what we think we should be doing, and we're doing what we're mandated to doing, and then following up so that if we're found lacking in any area, that there is real follow-up and real accountability for that.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Any comments? Sure.
I find audit quite interesting, actually, Nigel. I absolutely agree with you around where the risk lies and where the management of the risk lies. And importantly, I think what you've just picked up on, Wendy, is the shared risks. And I think we're going to see more shared risks of working together in partnership with our partners in the Department of Health and Social Care in particular. Especially when I look at the audits from a quality and safety perspective for the population that we serve, that shared risk with our partners in government is going to be, I think, more and more important going forward, and being able to demonstrate that for that assurance.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think I've seen a significant step change in our understanding of that, which means others' understanding will also improve. So I think it's really helpful that we're in this. Thank you. Tim, QSC.
As per the paper, there's a range of things there for assurance, but nothing particularly to alert the board on at this time. Happy to take any questions with my colleagues.
Any comments or questions?
Just to say, I chaired the committee on Tim's behalf, and the CQC action plan has really moved forward. We are in such a better place with that, and so I just wanted to record my thanks to Sheila and every colleague around the table that has worked on that, because it makes more sense, it reads more directly to the point, it's much clearer about what's in our gift to address and what is passed to the DHSC. So I know colleagues would be delighted to read it, and I would commend it to you, because I think it does tell the story of how far we've come in terms of understanding what's in our role to change and what those issues are that are out with our control. And so I just wanted to commend that to the broader board.
Thank you. And I think given where we were at the last board meeting, where we had an update on CQC, we probably should be scheduling an update. I think we said originally we do it quarterly, and I think we're probably coming up to that. So I certainly want that as a board in public, please, if we can. Thank you.
Just to check. I think that the programme plan is for a further report in March. Is that correct?
I'll be updating QSC on a monthly basis because of the slight step changes and the working with colleagues on that. But yes, I think it is.
We'll schedule around that.
I just think it's pretty good to get them in sync.
Absolutely right. I don't want to create unnecessary papers being slightly different 5 weeks apart or whatever. So, but as long as we can get that board schedule in, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anything else in QSC? And then FP&C, Nigel, that we're not discussing later on the agenda.
Okay. Not particularly, no. I think all of the points that we are discussing are on the agenda. Yeah, I've mentioned in a minute some of the things that cross over. Yeah, all of these items are going to come up.
Thank you very much. So now moving on to a really important item, partly for our understanding, partly for our responsibilities. And I think Tim, your colleague Nick, is coming to present.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so Nick's we're going to do a bit of a double act. It's fair to say, so I'm just.
So this is the item on safeguarding.
Right, okay.
Oh, okay. Do you want to do your aging population item?
That's me.
That's you. Do you want to do that now
Yeah.
while we're waiting for Nick?
Are you happy for me to run through it on the?
Of course. Whatever's easiest for you.
So this is so we agreed at the last private board that I would do an overview around the impact of ageing and frailty on health services, both in terms of kind of a statistical deep dive as well as a overview around what we're doing from a service point of view. So just in terms of just a bit of initial kind of background, so the percentage of the Isle of Man population who is over 65 years of age is 22.5%, which makes us the third oldest country in the world, with just slightly below Italy at 22.8%, and above Finland at 21.9% of the population being over 65. The number one oldest country within and the world is Japan, with 28.2% of the population over 65. However, based on current population projections, the over 65 population is due to increase to 28,365 by 2035, which will make it that number 28.2% of the overall population. The Independent Healthcare Review estimated that by 2036, the budget for Manx care would need to be 433 million if no changes to health and care delivery were made. The UK Health Foundation has also found that although the proportion of older people who need social care support at any age has fallen, the proportion of older people above 75 with one or more long-term conditions has increased, leading to an increased demand for NHS services, and that's certainly what we are seeing here on the Isle of Man. Just over the page is just a population pyramid of the Isle of Man versus the UK, and as you can see, there's a much older population, or much less young population, if you can say that, here compared to the Isle of Man. And as you can see, the kind of bulge, which is currently in the 50s to 60s, that will continue without the inward migration of younger people. That will continue for those people to move into old age over the next 10 to 20 years. Just from a statistics point of view, in terms of the impact of ageing on the health service, it has an impact across the entire health system, both primary and secondary care. So the slide there just shows the increase in number of average GP appointments per year as people get older, and similarly the average prescription cost increases. In terms of just over the page, the observations of the UK Health Foundation are reflected within our primary care data, meaning that advancing age is linked to the development of one or more of the long-term conditions. And as you can see there, the average age of the number of people with those number of long-term conditions, from 0, 1 up to 6 or more, does increase with age. However, it's worth placing that in context, that there has been a general increase in the number of long-term conditions across the island, across all ages, with the number of people living with one or more long-term conditions increasing from just over 56,000 in 2014 to just over 70,000 in 2024, which is an increase in 20%. So overall, our population is getting sicker. In terms of the impact on secondary care, the data from the non-elective pathways shows that whilst demand on the emergency department from people who are over 65 is only marginally higher than from other age groups, the percentage of total admissions within the 65 plus age group is much higher. So the overall conversion rate from ED attendance to admission for all age groups is 24.6%. However, if you isolate just the 65 plus age group, that increases to 45.7%. So that is quite a significant increase in the conversion rate from attendance to admission. So 33% of ED attendances are from the 65 plus care group. However, 61.67% of total admissions are from that care group. So you can see that quite a significant increase in demand from that portion of the population. So I move now from a kind of medical statistics lecture to a more of a clinical medicine lecture. So what is frailty? So frailty is a clinically recognised state of increased vulnerability that results from ageing associated with a decline in the body's physical and psychological reserves. In terms of what we know about frailty, so frailty is a progressive long-term health condition. It's linked to higher mortality risk, and care costs for a severely older person are 6 times higher than for a fit older person. So frailty is often diagnosed at crisis points, so like in attendance in ED, calling an ambulance, etc. And that has, up until the last few years, has very much how we've been managing frailty. However, early identification can slow, reverse or prevent further deterioration. So that's the area that we need to be focusing on. And in England, the electronic frailty index for GPs, not universally, but across a lot of England, helps GPs identify at-risk patients. So the loss of muscle mass, so sarcopenia as it's called, is a key factor in frailty, and that is obviously is our key driver within the hospital. Once you admit someone, have them in bed whilst we treat them for a number of days, their mobility reduces, their care needs reduce, and without that early intervention, whether that's physiotherapy or early supported discharge, that can, without doing that, that can often lead to quite a significant increase in care resources, whether that's home care or even admission into a residential or nursing home. Therefore, exercise is crucial in keeping older people fit and preventing frailty. I won't go through the next slide in detail, but that just is a kind of continuum of what frailty is in terms of the actual symptoms of frailty or the syndromes of frailty as they're known. But just over the page just shows that the current numbers for frailty. So around 50% of the 65 plus population currently on the Isle of Man is classed as frail, with 557 patients, individuals, I shouldn't say patients because they're not individuals, currently classed as severely frail. However, by 2040, that proportion is expected to grow by 69%, with over 15,000 older adults who are frail, with a significant increase in both the moderately and the severely frail. And that graphic just demonstrates the increase there. So in terms of, so I've told you the problem, so what have we done about it? So I've put the progress on supporting ageing and frailty. I've used 2019 as the starting point because that's when we really started to develop frailty as a specialty, both within the hospital but also outside of the hospital, in terms of the appointment of our frailty lead GP, and I'll mention Kate in a bit. So since 2019, we've recruited 5 consultant geriatricians. We've funded and recruited 5 consultant geriatricians, which I think is quite an achievement, because I always remember Andrew Foster mentioning to me in the 10 plus years that he was the chief exec of Wigan Wrightington and Leeds and managed to recruit a single geriatrician. and we've managed to recruit 5 over the last 5 years. There's been a bit of turnover there, but we do have a stable consultant geriatrician largely based in the hospital, but do have community commitments I'll talk about later. We've established a dedicated inpatient frailty unit, which is Ward 6, and we've launched the Wellbeing Partnerships. So the first one launched in February 2020, just in time for COVID, which was in the West, and we're now fully embedded within the West, South and North with a development underway within the Eastern region. We've recruited a number of clinical staff dedicated to frailty, such as the frailty GP, who is Kate Tebay, who manages to do a huge amount on just 1 day a week, dedicated to frailty. We've also appointed a frailty advanced clinical practitioner, frailty pharmacists. Just following on from COVID, we developed during COVID a care home support team, but that metamorphosized into what is the care home assessment and review team, which is a joint initiative between ourselves, the frailty team in the hospital, GP practices, and the medicines optimization team that's based out in community. So they're a roving team that support all of the nursing homes across the island with reviewing their patients from a frailty point of view, from a polypharmacy point of view, and also from a treatment escalation planning point of view. That's had a huge impact both in terms of individual residents being brought to ED when they reach a crisis point. It's significantly reduced the number of medications, which has had a beneficial effect both from a financial point of view, but also from a frailty point of view, and has also helped to set the foundations of the comprehensive geriatric assessment process, which I'll mention a bit later. As Teresa mentioned earlier, the intermediate care team is now fully up and running, which provides crisis response, admission avoidance, and early facilitated discharge. We relaunched the osteoporosis service, which was suspended for several years. Professor Prakash, who joined us earlier on this year from Chester, who is an osteoporosis specialist, has relaunched that. We've established a system-wide frailty steering group to coordinate all of these developments across Manx care, whether that's primary care, hospital, community, etc. And we've also developed the frailty clinic MDT pilot in the north, which is one of Dr. Tebay's main kind of focuses, alongside Dr. Davies, who's one of our consultant geriatricians, and in the time that's been running, that has enabled patients who otherwise would have stayed in hospital because there was no ability for them to be followed up in the community, actually allows earlier discharge on the basis that they can be followed up within the frailty clinic, and that's also focused significantly on polypharmacy, and in the 6 months that that's been running, that saved 30k of costs. The actual care home assessment team has saved probably well over 100,000 of cost in terms of polypharmacy. Totting all of that up is around a 6.5 million investment for kind of Manx Care predecessor DHSC over that 5-year period. So that kind of just outlines what we've done to date. However, as part of the frailty steering group, they've been working together with the support of MIAA over the last year to develop a frailty strategy, which will take us through the next 5 years of this journey, where we are at the moment is the business case is under final stages of being developed. But the vision for the frailty strategy is to enable older adults on the Isle of Man to live well, retain independence and avoid unnecessary hospitalisation by focusing on early identification of frailty and falls, consistent assessment, comprehensive care planning and personalised and targeted interventions. So we're working, as you can expect, there's interventions happening in a community basis and also from a hospital point of view at the moment. So I'll just quickly run through these. So from a community point of view, we're looking at using the electronic frailty index and clinical frailty scale to case find. At the moment, we don't have the ability to use the electronic frailty index within primary care, although that is a function of EMIS that we use. And that's just currently being looked at in terms of the practicalities of being able to switch that on. Comprehensive geriatric assessments already happening within the frailty clinic and within the care home assessment team, but looking at more widely rolling that out and expanding the multidisciplinary team concept that we're currently trialling in the north, which is a community-based frailty team which includes GPs, geriatricians, advanced care practitioners, pharmacists and dietitians to deliver integrated care closer to home. And that is working really well so far in the north, as I've said, and the plan is to roll that out a bit further to all of the compass points of the island. From a hospital point of view, we're looking to introduce front door frailty. So this is placing frailty special expertise as close as possible to the point of admission. And we're actually looking to pilot that as part of the winter plan. Just doing some temporary job plan changes within our geriatrician group and the wider medical consultant group, just to place for a couple of days a week geriatrician between AMU and ED to pick up anyone that's been admitted over the past 24 hours to make sure that their frailty or their care plan is frailty focused, which will mean that we can hopefully reduce length of stay to expedite referrals to community frailty services or intermediate care, or to look to discharge home with the appropriate follow-up. Also looking at introducing the comprehensive geriatric assessment across the hospital. That is something that is already in place within the frailty unit, but given that probably the average age of inpatients across the hospital is around 70, the comprehensive geriatric assessment has a place across every ward, and we want to be able to embed that as part of the routine assessment and care planning, and then also intervening through a rapid assessment and direct admission of frail patients to the frailty unit, and that would be a function of the front door frailty kind of service, making sure that people that do need inpatient frailty care can be on the best place for their care as quickly as possible. The next slide is just a diagram showing the fact that we want to align the community frailty service alongside the wider primary care at scale. So that just shows the idea of the fact that we will have regional clinics that will mirror the success of the north, but within each of the localities. And finally, the final slide is just the next steps. So the main priority is to complete and submit the frailty business case. It does look like that business case will be self-funding through the full realisation of medicines optimisation within this group, and some other service changes that we are looking to make. So we're not expecting any external investment around that. We may look for some priming funding through transformation just to get us through the first year, so we can ensure that those benefits are realised before we start moving money around the system. We want to establish the Northern Locality Board, which will look to establish the wellbeing hub within the north, which is bringing together the successes of the wellbeing partnership, the frailty MDT, as well as working with the local GPs to really start to develop kind of a semi-independent board to direct community services and primary care services within that region. Progressing the recruitment to the posts that were funded from around the Eastern Wellbeing Partnership. As the board might be aware, we received some funding through the homelessness strategy, which enables us to establish the Eastern Wellbeing Partnership on the basis that we will be the front door for homelessness. But we're also looking at recasting the locality boundaries so that we can balance up the population that is being served by each wellbeing partnership, ending up with 4 wellbeing partnerships across the island. And then finally, just the recruitment to the approved falls prevention practitioner posts, which are secondary to the improvement notice that we got from the Health and Safety Executive. But even though those are being recruited kind of in isolation, they will form part of the wider frailty workforce. So working with those other posts that are funded through the business case, so that there is a kind of a complete offer that we can provide both within the hospital and the community around frailty prevention and reversal. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Very comprehensive and somewhat sobering for some of us, depending on where we are on that spectrum. But thank you, really helpful update. I'll take questions as Tim and then Nigel, and then Oliver.
Thank you. I thought it was an absolutely fabulous report. I thought it was just brilliant in terms of the transformation of that service and the offer for older people. And if I was a resident on the island, I would be very assured by that and by the services which are available, which I think will probably outshine many services elsewhere. Also, because language is important, I really commend the report for not using the pejorative term "the elderly." So many of our discussions and so many of our reports talk about the elderly as a group, and that pejorative use of that phrase, I think, is really, really unhelpful. And I think it's just magnificent that this report completely avoids that. So well done. Just a few questions and comments which don't need to be answered here. Just interested, given the ED conversion rates, about what the outcomes were for the admitted group. Did they benefit from admission? Did they need to be admitted, or was it just for tests at that particular time and then they go back with no interventions? So just interested in that. Also, the importance of the wellbeing hubs and the work in the MDT in the North sounds really excellent and good, but that's looking to be rolled out. Just from something elsewhere, just interested in the availability of consultant geriatricians to ambulance crews and community professionals in order to avoid admission if community professionals are concerned. It's quite often useful to have a conversation with the GP, to have a conversation with a consultant geriatrician to see whether the person does need to be admitted or not, or what the risks are in the person remaining at home. I propose, I don't know what the process for this is, that the board endorses the vision statement. I think the vision statement for older people was really helpful, really good, and I think could be transferred into a range of other vision statements for Manx care. And we really suggest that we endorse that. And then finally, it's really good to capture and measure the outcomes. And I just wondered whether there was an independent university or institution that might want to be involved and would look at that and write it up, because it does seem to be, and I don't and taken my thing. It really did impress me. Thank you.
Nigel then Sheila. Oh, sorry, Nigel, Oliver then Sheila.
Oh, really, thank you. Well, I am a resident on the Isle of Man, and I suspect I'm much closer to 70 than I would like to be, and probably than anybody else in this room. So, Oliver, I am one of your statistics, and I sincerely hope that I continue to be one of your statistics for a long time to come. And well, I've been called many things in my life, not yet frail, so this is good news. I absolutely thought this paper was terrific. It's an immense amount of work, and I think you should be congratulated, you and your team, in putting this together and bringing this to us. I really enjoyed it. I think it's really good. It's exactly where we should be as a board, because this is a tsunami, isn't it? This is a tsunami coming down the tracks, and we can see it, and we have advance notice of it. So we should be shouting it from the rooftops and doing all of these things and more as quickly and as fast as we possibly can. And I think, one of the things I do hear as an island resident is that sometimes Manx Care was fantastic, but I didn't know they provided that service. So I think we should be shouting this from the rooftops, and we should be ensuring that older people, and as people go on this journey, know what we can do and what we can do to help and how to support. And we should be publicising this, because we're effectively bringing in efficiency, all the kind of values that we want to bring to the Manx populace: efficiency, value for money, length of days, good health, wealth. Slant as they would say in Manx. But absolutely marvellous. So power to your elbow. More of that, please.
Thank you. Yes, I think this is such an important strand of the work that Manx Care needs to be doing, and it very much aligns with the PCAS priorities of moving that centre of care away from the hospital and closer to where people are and where people live and where they want to be. And I think something that it's a comment rather than a question, I suppose. Something that we really need to emphasise, and I think we are emphasising, is that this process isn't something that's done to people with frailty, older people. This is something that really empowers them to sit down. They have space, they and their families and their friends, if they want, and healthcare professionals have time and space to sit down and say, what is my priority? What do I want to happen as I go through this journey of frailty? What is going to happen, and how would I like to be treated? And part of this frailty work, which is the you hadn't touched on, which is also important, is the treatment escalation plans, and that is really a very formal way of drawing up. If people can say, as I get older, if I get ill, what do I want to happen? Do I want to go to A&E and have needles put in, or do I want to be managed at home? Do I want to, live in a nursing home or a residential home? So I think that we must emphasise that this is very much about helping people live how they want, live as healthily as they can, as they want.
Sheila, then Teresa.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Oliver. That was brilliant, and I agree with you. I really do that. This is Manx Care's mandate, without a shadow of a doubt, and really strong operating plan for the tsunami, as you described, but really emphasising the patient, the carers, the public's pathway through this journey. And I think it goes back to, how do people know? How do people know what's out there? How do people know how they can utilise and share and make sure that their carers are supported as well? And we're back to a clinical care strategy. We're back to, let's get this pathway on a page where everybody, the public we serve, can understand it, the language is right, people can connect with it, people know where they are in that pathway. And I think we're capable of doing that. I think it's really exciting work.
Yeah, just a comment and a question. The question first, Oliver, is presumably all the data you have put in this presentation, which is excellent, that's come from the Ageing Well JSMA?
Yes, it's come from the same data set that we submitted.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so yeah, it's our data. Because I think, again, it's a real strong nod to the health economics piece, evidence-based population health and the way we should be making our strategic decisions moving forward, the things that we should be talking about in terms of what does 10 years time, what does 20 years time look like, and what do we need to do now in order to prepare for that. The other aspect of this, in terms of that broader, ensuring everybody on the island understands what we're doing, why we're doing it, and the importance of it, is I would be suggesting this is one of the key documents we share with Tynwald members, and invite them, when we next brief them, to walk them through this document as a sort of discussion point to focus around. And we can link things like the carer strategy, the home first strategy into the discussion around this document, because we're not going to be able to deliver frailty unless we've got a good carer strategy and an implementation plan which sits behind it, unless there is the home first solutions and the home care provision which enable people to stay in their communities. So give those clear nods to those linked strategies from which frailty sits as part of that.
Thank you, really helpful summary. Just a couple of comments from me. So yes, excellent, and thank you. And clearly the sort of strategic end of the board's thinking will be influenced by this. I think when you present this and share this more widely, it'd be really helpful to know what has 6.5 million got us in terms of outcomes. What are the tangible benefits from that? Because I think that it's a very large sum of money over a 5-year period, and building something is great, but have we started to shift the demand curve in any way at all? I think you have. I just think that language would be helpful.
Yeah.
And the other thing is I'd really encourage it as we start the conversation around developing with an academic partner, that this is exactly the sort of thing that we should be asking external academic audit, if you like. But are we meeting the outcomes that we've set? Let's try and work with some of our academic partners, UCloud or wherever it might be, to actually look at this in more detail. So, but it's a very impressive piece of work. And I think what I'd like to see is how is this knitted into our mandate, competitions, just operating plan for a year, changes to what's going to happen in general practice. Yeah, all of those big questions. So I think this is really helpful. Close that item. So I think we've now found Vic. We're running a bit, basically running early. So thanks, Oliver, for stepping in a little.
Okay.
So we're now moving on to safeguarding. This is what we asked at the board some time ago, is that we do some deep dives into areas that either we need as a board to check our understanding of, but also we need to recognise where our risks sat as a board. So when Nick's arrived, I'll hand over to you, Tim.
Thank you, Chair.
Clearly we'll walk about again.
Absolutely, yeah.
There he is. Excellent. Nick, welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
Morning, Nick.
Sorry to keep you waiting.
That's no problem. We're going to do some interesting we're going to be looking over people's heads now and doing presentations. No, I'm fine, Chelsea. Yeah, we can. It takes about 2 hours, but not for the minutes. Not for the minutes. So thank you for sparing a few minutes of the board's time to introduce you to our safeguarding work. As Wendy said, a deeper dive into what we do. As you'd expect, I'm going to say it's a very complex, involved activities, and we've necessarily in this first engagement kept it at a relatively strategic level, and really doing a few very simple things to start with, just introduce you to what we do, how we do it, and then a specific focus on self-neglect, which Nick will talk us through, which gives us a really good example of how we're pushing integration internally within our care groups, and how there's a really important piece of work to do around joining together safeguarding services around particular pathways and particular activities and risks to children and adults. And then something around progress made so far, perhaps in the last 12 months, let's say, and as you'd expect me to say, some opportunities and challenges, and an invite really, and some comments to the board about how we might want your help moving forward in the safeguarding space. So if we just move quickly to the first slide, Elaine, thank you. John, Jane, thank you. So I'm sure colleagues will know what safeguarding is about. It's important to restate that the environment of children and adults are slightly different. It's important to flag that. The statutory frameworks around them are different. One of the drives that I've brought into Manx Care is our intention to draw together and to bring synergy to our safeguarding services across the island. And what the slide does is it shows you the 4 kind of key elements of our internal workings of safeguarding. We have a small but mighty safeguarding team led by Terry Banks that reaches into the hospital and other health settings and works in partnership with health colleagues to reduce risk and to address harm where we see it. And there's a very strong focus there on early intervention and prevention in focusing on that work. Our Children and Family Services led by Julie Gibney, as you can see there, 4 critical elements. The heart of it is what you would call it traditional statutory work. We call what is called across it is called children in need. We call complex need. So children with complex needs, it's important to be aware of that. We've branded it slightly differently, but it's effectively the same set of activities. And then our Section 46 work is what's across Section 47, so child protection, and all of that is fully resolved on the island, and we run, I think, pretty effective services in those spaces with what is a fairly lean staff group. Like many services in children and families, we struggle sometimes to fully resolve all the partnership activity in children's social care, and getting the right engagement at the right times is something we're still working on, but we're very, very committed to from a partnership point of view. And then what that number 2 also shows is we're very, very focused on early intervention. Again, we're very lean in that area at the moment in children and families, and our drive over the next 2-3 years is to increase that activity and to expand the number of children and people who are dealing with and supporting with their families before they get into any kind of statutory process. And then 2 really critical ones for the island: criminal and sexual exploitation. Sexual exploitation, relatively new, as a series of activities on the island to support children and people in that space. Those of you who follow what happened across with the CSE agenda will have some understanding of that. And we're working really closely with partners to address that area. There's a range of thematic pieces of work going on in that space. Adult safeguarding we'll talk a bit more about in a second. Preventing harm for adults over 18. Lovely companion piece to Oliver's excellent presentation. There's an obvious backdrop to our work with adult safeguarding in the ageing population, but also in relation to isolation, loneliness, and self-neglect, which Nick will talk about in a second. And we're making some good progress, as I'll talk about later, in that space, from a challenging space in some areas when came to post. And then finally, in relation to adult mental health, really the space there is around getting our early intervention services for both children and adults to work effectively with our safeguarding services, and that's progressing well, I would say. And as we referred to there in the MDT space in particular, to identify those safeguarding risks that are coming through when we address those early mental health issues. So that's broadly the framework we're working to. The one final thing I'd say before I move over to Nick is, I'll talk about this later, partnership is key here. Our safeguarding board is key, chaired by Leslie Walker, and we're building a really good, strong challenge and support relationship there with the board. Some of my staff would say it's more challenge and support. Very fully resolved board arrangement here on the island, and we're fully engaged with that. That is challenging from a point of view of fully servicing it with a relatively small team, but hopefully Nick would agree my position is it's right for residents on the island that we do that, and we have to face that challenge up front. So I'm sure Leslie would say it's a good challenge and support relationship at the moment. So on to Nick, who's going to talk to us a little bit about self-neglect.
Thanks, Tim. So I'm sure some of you will be aware of the self-neglect thematic review that was published in August 2022. This looked at learning from the sad deaths of 7 people on the Isle of Man in the previous 2 years before August 22, who all died in circumstances of self-neglect. The learning was collated from the thematic review, and a strategy and pathway were implemented in autumn 2023. And very briefly, in terms of kind of integration theme, that's integration at system level. Manx Care are core members of the Isle of Man Safeguarding Board, and we work with other key partners across public services as part of the Safeguarding Board, and that led to a change in our collective approach to self-neglect. This has had a profound impact on safeguarding casework. 50% today, 50% of our open safeguarding cases have a primary support reason of self-neglect. 15, 16, 17, 18 months ago, that would not have been the case. There would have been self-neglect issues in our safeguarding casework, but it wouldn't have been noted and it wouldn't have been risk assessed using the new tools that have come from the new pathway. So it has had an absolutely profound impact on our practice. And there's a couple of points to make there, but one key point is it does show as a system, we can take in learning, we can create new ways of working, and it can make a difference. I'll come back to that later in the presentation. In terms of outcomes and learning, I'll come to positive change for people at the end, but in terms of the Manx Care Partnership, the various services that Tim mentioned in the first slide meet every day for half an hour at 9:30 to triage incoming safeguarding work. And one of the things I've been struck by, since I should have introduced myself, I'm the Assistant Director of Adult Social Work, since I arrived in mid-July, I've been really impressed with the multi-agency work, not just within Manx Care, but with partners in the police, to triage incoming safeguarding alerts every morning, 9:30. It's one of the best integrated approaches to triage that I've seen. It's something you should be collectively very proud about and recognise the contribution it makes to helping keep people safe. 50% of those alerts coming in relate to self-neglect. So that's where the Manx Care Partnership is at its best. Also, this is a great example of joint working with government. So alongside the self-neglect demand we take in our services, we do a lot of work with homelessness, and the two areas overlap. And it's been very newsworthy in recent months on the island. There's been a lot of issues about the pressures on services, on accommodation for homeless people. But there's a lot of problems that we face and a lot of pressures that we face. This one happens to be associated with some resources and some strategic action led by government in the Housing and Communities Board. So 4 new support worker posts have been funded by the Housing and Communities Board. They will take up post very, very shortly. I think interviews happened in the last 10 days or so. They will take up post in the wellbeing partnerships very shortly, and there is work developing to address the need for some bespoke homelessness accommodation on the island as well. So it's a really good example, not only of integration within Manx Care, it's a great example of work across government and Manx Care. And understanding likely impact, it's just really my opportunity to say the referrals into our adult generic team, who are the social work team who take most of these referrals, are double what they were 12 months ago. So that's a very short summary of the impact in terms of demand and capacity that obviously we are managing within existing resources. Positive change for people. I've just come from an event facilitated by Sylvia Manson, who wrote the thematic review in August 22. She's back across here to help us understand how things are going and continuing to play that critical friend role on behalf of the Safeguarding Board that Tim mentioned earlier. But as part of the work that led up to her visit today, we brought together the independent chair, Leslie Walker, with 5 individuals who'd received support in relation to their needs relating to self-neglect. I'm just going to leave you with 4 quotes that are in Leslie Walker's report on her experience of meeting those people. The 4 quotes are: "I wouldn't be here now without the support I received. Staff do much more than they are paid to do. My life is different now. They understood my anxiety and went at my pace. They challenged me to ensure I didn't get stuck again." And those are 4 direct quotes from individuals who spoke to the independent chair of the Safeguarding Board. So I'll leave you there, and I think that's just a quick skim through some of the self-neglect work we've been working on.
Excellent, excellent. So we've got 2 more slides, Chair, that's okay. So bringing the lens back out again, across those 4 elements of safeguarding across the partnership, what progress has been made in the last 12 months. Deliberately didn't invite you to look again at all the data that sits in our performance report, which obviously is a companion piece to this in terms of assessment timeliness and achievements of outcomes, but it's important to kind of just flag that. The health safeguarding team functions really effectively and supports incredibly well in serious incidents, in early support, reaching into the hospital and other health environments, and also in a training and development space, really strong, and long will that continue, and that works across Sheila's area and my area. From a children and families point of view, I would flag up the multi-agency safeguarding hub, which remains unfortunately slightly underfunded, and we're going to keep hammering away at that to get that effectively funded. It's a best-in-class approach, well established elsewhere, and carefully handled can have a huge impact on working together to safeguard children and hopefully adults as well in the future. From a children's perspective as well, just to flag a range of really specialist project work going on at the moment around exploitation, and you can see the words there, I won't repeat them, but around sexual and criminal exploitation. We remain vigilant about the risks around youth justice, and there are a couple of things there. The first is, you'll know already, we've reported previously around Cronk Solish, which is our secure facility, is effectively full. And then the second issue I would raise there, this is my personal opinion, is that we need to look at the threshold for punitive intervention across the island. I think it's a problem for us, whichever way we cut it. There are too many young people coming through on an order and nowhere to support them and no way of supporting them. So that's a problem for us moving forward. And I'm very keen to reach out to colleagues elsewhere in the criminal justice system to help solve that problem. From an adult safeguarding point of view, we have now a stable team. The reason I use the word stable is because it probably wasn't quite so stable when I arrived, and Nick has done a fabulous job since he's been in post in the summer to help bring that team forward. The word containment is in social work is often used. The team certainly look and feel and feedback a much more stable environment, positive environment to do work in. Still work in progress, still very much a journey, but we can demonstrate that progress that's been made. And I think a positive response to increasing demand rather than how you would describe it as a kind of slope-shouldered approach. Very forward thinking, and that's down to the management and leadership in that area. We're continuing to provide some support to our adult safeguarding team and to our wider adult folk workforce, which I think is the right thing to do. But I feel increasingly confident we can move forward with some momentum into the coming business years. And then on mental health, I think it's about that applied learning. You know, Ross and the team are doing a brilliant job in that space, and I see more and more examples of where that interaction is taking place effectively. Our mental health services are sizable and diverse, and we've got to keep working at that to make sure we don't let the gaps, but it feels like we're making good progress in that space. And then just to finish, Chair, as you'd expect me to finish with opportunities and challenges. So the huge opportunities around integration, and obviously I've just shown us here in the room the 4 kind of relatively discrete teams that I'm looking to bring together more effectively, but you can see from what we've said here today, we're looking to do that right across Manx Care and across the island much more effectively. And there's an opportunity to move into the more community awareness space and preventative action space, which is obviously where mature safeguarding systems want to be. So we're mobilising community eyes and ears, and we're enabling local communities to take a bit more control of safeguarding alongside our expert support. In terms of challenges, the shift to early help and prevention is going to remain tricky in the current financial envelope, but it's something we're continuing to be focused on. We've got specific issues around money with capital, particularly around Cronk Solish and other settings like that. Fostering remains a challenge in terms of numbers, although you'll know from previous reports we have made progress on that and will continue to do so. And then the issues I've already mentioned around youth justice. So what would we want from the board? If Leslie were in the room, I'm channeling my inner Leslie now. Safeguarding is everybody's business, and it's really important that we get that message across. So everybody in the room has a role to play in getting that message across. We're taking baby steps in that space at the moment, but I know that if Ashley were in the room, she would say that's something we want to do more of. And we'll come back and speak to the board about how we can do that more practically as we move through, particularly the next business year. Just support and awareness in relation to that managing demand issue. The more we look, the more we find is really the simple message. And but that's kind of okay in terms of keeping residents safe, but we just need to be alive to that and work together on meeting that challenge. And then increased oversight in particular areas where we're doing particular review work in learning disability, for example, that colleagues will already know about, and we'll be coming back to report on that early in the new year. And then facilitating partnership work, and we were talking earlier about board, and we're touching on that later in the week, aren't we, in terms of board responsibilities and how board members can help. There's something around facilitating good partnership in the safeguarding space, which is something I want to talk to colleagues about as we move through. So just to finish, absolute continuing laser-like focus on integration, and that will continue. The wellbeing hubs Oliver mentioned earlier. We have we were really keen to build more into wellbeing hubs and to support the leaders in those spaces to drive safeguarding in that space as well as we can. That likely increased need we already know about, but the overall message is we remain focused on shifting away from acute to community and preventative in the safeguarding space as well, with Home First being the kind of playing field on which we do that. So thank you. 5 questions. Thank you.
Thank you. That was really comprehensive. Thank you very much, and very nice to questions, comments, Nigel.
Thank you, Wendy. I think from my perspective, we're getting a cornucopia of excellence of strategic papers this morning, and I just wanted to mark that because I think this is really exciting, really interesting. And thank you, Tim. Thank you, Nick, for this really excellent presentation. As you rightly say, safeguarding is everybody's business. I used to chair a school. It was at the heart of everything we did. You know, you can't educate children unless they're safe, and the whole thing follows right through and so on. So a great paper. And the other thing is, I thought, you know, we are having a board meeting in public, and I know there are financial tensions, and I know the financial envelope is difficult, but this is absolutely where we should be as a board, and absolutely where we should be as an organisation, and in helping to get people aligned and get the rhetoric joined up with the reality. And these are the big picture things that I think we should be concentrating on. So I would encourage you, as I would encourage Oliver, to spread the word. And maybe because the noise, the financial noise, detracts from so much of the good work that is happening, which must tire out the teams, tire you out, this constant chipping, you know. Let's get these messages out there, these strategic messages of what our vision is and where we're going over the next 1, 3, 5, 10 years, because it's a really good news story. And I think the majority of Manx people want to hear it. And I think we're seeing a lot of noise from negative souls. We're not hearing much noise from very, very positive souls. And I would encourage you as an executive to get these stories out there.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Wendy. And just following on from Nigel's point, I think we've kind of skipped over it in what you said there, but one of the areas where I don't think we're particularly good at blowing our own trumpet is we see examples all the time of meeting growing demand without making additional investment, and you just mentioned it there. We can see it in the statistics. We can see increased productivity, increased performance. You're doing more with what we've got. And I think if we were to carry out an exercise to understand how much of that is actually going on across Manx Care, you'd see a very different picture in terms of value for money, rather than we need to maintain a focus on the bottom line. But I think sometimes we miss that hidden gain that we make because we're not reducing what we're spending, but we are doing a hell of a lot more with what we are.
And I'll just add just 2 numbers there. In 2018, we took 200 adult safeguarding referrals. In 2023, we took 1,200. Wow. So I think that's just one useful number.
And through our performance management and some of the data that's coming through, we are seeing that replicated across all parts of our system, where the teams are doing things differently, working differently, developing new ways of working that benefit our service users, but actually are being much more efficient with what we've already got. Whereas if we were to simply add on what we already had on a numerical basis, you'd be talking about doubling, tripling, quadrupling our spend, and that's not what we're doing. We're keeping it level.
Yes, I'm conscious of time,
That's
so unless it's absolutely perfect, I want to go around people. Tim?
Just three things. Thank you. A really great report, really insightful and helpful. I just wanted to pick up three areas. One was to say really good about the greater stability within all of the teams, and I think that we shouldn't ever underestimate the impact that safeguarding work has on our practitioners and the emotional impact, etc. And so to be in a stable team where there's you support, peer support, but also managerial support is really important to give a much better outcome. I also just wanted to highlight the example of the neglect work and say it's just really good to see that there was a review. It did have an impact. It has created change. So many times we see reviews that are just put on the bookcase or in a electronic library or wherever they go these days. And I think it's just really, really good to see that there was a beginning, a middle, and an end point which continues. And I think that's to be applauded. And I think the last thing I just wanted to emphasise is the amount of partnership work going on within Manx Care, but also remembering that Manx Care isn't the only organisation on the island. So it isn't all up to Manx Care. Our relationships with the police service, with the justice services, and with fire and rescue, etc., and also the voluntary sector and the community groups is really important. Again, this is a really good example of how we're not just inward looking to see how Manx Care can solve the problem, looking outside to our partners. So excellent, thank you very much.
Kate, on screen.
Thanks, Wendy. It was really just following on from Jackie's point, actually, which around the sort of increased demand for the services and the fact that that's all been swallowed within existing resources. I suppose it's just the obvious question, which is I'm assuming that that hasn't resulted in a reduction in quality. It has simply resulted in increased efficiency. And then it was really the obvious follow-up from that, which is, in which case, what can other services learn from what you've achieved?
Nick may have a comment on this, but that's a really great question, Kate. Thank you. I was going to come back on that earlier. So in simple terms, at the moment, I think the way I would describe it is we've had a space to move into in terms of working with staff to work differently. Different ways of assessing, different ways of reviewing different ways of delivering intervention, and that's the kind of simple answer. Eventually we'll run out of road for that, I think, is what we're kind of thinking, and that's I'm absolutely right. What Tim's said around partnerships is key to us in the medium term, is building more capacity by working together. But in the very long term, that will again come back to us potentially as a problem. I mean, I was thinking about this in the presentation. Eventually we'll hit an end point in terms of need. I remember years ago when they first brought in antisocial behaviour legislation, you had this panic around this. It was a similar kind of thing, and eventually they reached a kind of optimum point, and one would hope eventually we'll do a similar thing on the island. But your point's really well made, but it's largely about changing practice and asking people to work differently. Nick, did you want to
just two things? I think the adult safeguarding team performance is extraordinary, and I feel that they do a great job, actually. I think they're one of 4 teams in adult social work. The other 3 teams are creaking under the pressure, because adult safeguarding take the referrals in, identify the risk, create a planning meeting, and then, of course, people have to go off and do the work to help keep somebody safe, which can go on for months and months and months. So I think it's creaking in some places. Adult safeguarding team really exemplary in terms of the way that they've dealt with the new demand.
Did I miss your second question, Kate? Sorry. What lessons?
It was just what other services could learn.
I'm going to ignore that one. No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
Questions for the board.
Loads is the answer.
I think it's just about reflecting on how we might work differently. I think, that why do we do things a particular way? Can we do it differently? That's the kind of key bit.
Just to build on Tim's point, I remember that report coming in 2022, and it was really, really distressing to read. It was really distressing, and so thank you so much for taking it forward and coming back with assurance to the board that we are focused on hopefully never having to receive another report like that. So thank you for that. In terms of your asks of the board, I see that piece around prevention and early intervention and the piece around partnership working. And we were talking yesterday about how can we include politicians more closely in the work that we do, but also the partners that we need to work with. And I wonder whether there is a innovative and interesting way of workshopping some of these risks that demonstrate the reality of the situation, particularly around the safeguarding agenda, because I think it is, it is abhorrent that in 2024 we are still talking about self-neglect, self-harm, exploitation of children, vulnerability of adults, and a society that is failing those people in some way. And I wonder whether broadening that out to the politicians in particular, but also to partners that are interested in working with us, could be a really exciting and innovative and it will be distressing because we're talking about issues that none of us really want to acknowledge, but we should acknowledge them and they should be exactly where we are operating. And so I'd be excited to see what that might look like. Tim.
Really helpful suggestion, thanks.
Thank you.
To just wrap up.
Yeah, sorry, and it was just building on that point, Sarah, and the point Tim made around sort of the criminal justice side of this and those individuals who are on the edge of the criminal justice system. This is, I mean, obviously 18 months ago it took the multi-agency safeguarding hub in. It was always going to be a success. It demonstrates the best practice around multi-agency working, and it is something we should absolutely prioritise and move forward with. But it also speaks to that broader issue that we have a key role in influencing the system working and what the system should look like. And I would argue that we're probably not strategic and got the right framework, the right meeting structure across the system in order to really affect this. And the example Tim gave is the correct one, in that what we've had is Manx Care working quite progressively in this space, but we've also seen the police take a very different approach on the island in the last 18 months, which has absolutely filled the prison, for which there's the consequences. And what we should all do is move in step with each other. We're a small island system, so we need to see everybody move in step, and we all need to understand the codependencies and impacts of whatever is happening across the system. So the fact is, one part of the system has filled the prison, and we haven't thought about what that means in terms of the court system, for probation, how we keep people out of those systems. I think it absolutely does say we need to be influencing our position more strategically to say, have we got the right systems above Manx Care across the whole island? Who's on the criminal justice board? What are they discussing? And trying to get some of these difficult issues progressed and so we can all move forward together, I think, and in step with each other as partners.
Thank you. Really helpful summary. Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm going to move on because we're running late now. So moving on to the people culture engagement update. Miriam, your paper, your paper is read, please. So
yes.
The issue read.
I'll keep it brief, Chair.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Yes, I'll keep it brief. Chair, so the paper is read, but one of the key points on there is around the implementation of the people, culture and engagement strategy, which will be progressing through normal governance routes. Workforce planning is a bit of an issue in relation to the original island-wide issue when Manx Care was created under the transformation plan, in that island-wide workforce modelling was not done by the Transformation Directorate, and that has now had an impact on us internally in relation to building our own internal workforce plan. So I'm working quite closely with the Director of Transformation about how we can use their resource better, but also get in the right skill set to work with that to enable us to have our own workforce plan. And the mandatory training point has already been picked up. So we will be progressing that, and we will be making sure that the questions that we've already posed today will be answered in the coming weeks. The 2024 staff survey, I would really urge colleagues to, wherever you go and whoever you speak to urge people to to respond to that. At the moment, we're looking at that 15% response rate after 3 weeks, which is significantly higher than it was at this point last year. So, you know, let's keep that up, because we can only use that data if people are actually telling us what they think. Which brings me very neatly into the culture of care barometer feedback. So the Chief Exec and Interim Medical Director, as it says in the report, attended the Medical Staffing Committee, and we had some conversations yesterday about this. And we will be workshopping the outcomes of this alongside those areas that are already agreed by the Chief Executive, to ensure that we've got a concise action plan to bring back to the board on what needs to happen following the receipt of that. But one of the things that I'm really keen to do is not to leave that on its own, recognising the difference in relation to our medical colleagues. However, the wider staff survey is really where we should be taking the bulk of our data in relation to our staff morale and what people are feeling. And we've very actively asked the medical workforce to respond to the wider staff survey as well, to include their voice. And I'll leave it there, Chair.
It's really helpful. I've just got one quick question which I forgot to ask earlier. Where are we on staff vaccination for flu and COVID this winter?
That would be a clinical question. Do you know?
I don't mind if no one knows, but I think we do need to encourage that. I presume there is an offer to staff to vaccinate, so it'd be really helpful to know what our figures are, because they're very low in England at the moment in staff, and there's significant worry about why that might be. So
it's the same here.
Right. Okay. And have we got a plan to try and increase uptake?
So, sorry, Chair, so I've intervened on this because it is exceptionally low. We could do better. So the communication, making sure that that the vaccinators are going to the place of work, instead of having to go to one central place. The communication isn't where we need it to be, so we reviewed that, had a look at it. It's you need posters with our own staff on, actually getting the injection at the same time. So we're doing a quick review of that, and I've had the leads come to talk to me with the associate directors in nursing, and collectively we're going to support all of this team to do this, to increase the numbers.
I'm sure that a number of us are very happy to share our personal vaccination record, if that will help, because I know in the past we've used, the board has been vaccinated, why aren't you, sort of quick thing. So please contact us individually if that will help.
I was just going to say, I think there's a really important leadership thing there in terms of us as a board. You've been clear about whether we've had vaccinations or not.
I mean, a key thing is those forward-facing clinical people need to vaccinate. So we want people who are clinical showing that they've done this as well.
I just think this year's going to be really important. Thank you, Miriam. That's really helpful. Any other comments from anyone? No? Okay, so thank you. Now we're moving on to the September management accounts and finance update. Jackie?
Thank you, Chair. So you'll note from the September management accounts that our forecast year-end position continues to improve. We've reduced the forecast deficit by just over £750,000 this year. So this is a reflection of the continued focus and actions at all levels across the organisation in terms of bringing us back towards balance. When we last met, we were discussing a range of actions that we had agreed as a board, and a range of actions that we had been asked to provide to the department and onwards to Coleman in terms of potential actions that could be taken to address that issue. The executive actions we continue to progress with, and we expect to see the forecast continue to improve over the coming months as those actions take effect. We'll have heard in the news that a number of proposals that went to Coleman have given a very clear direction that they were not prepared to support those. So that does leave us with a larger gap than we would want, because a large part of our back to balance strategy and plan was in initiating a number of those, even though we felt that they were unpalatable. So We've got about, we're progressing around about 5 to 6 million of actions with the exec and with some enhanced financial recovery plans from the care groups. So we're doing work at all levels from the bottom to the top and everything in between to get to as close to a financial position by the end of the year as we can. In terms of some of the other highlights, SIP performance to date is 5.9 million, 5.4 of which is cash out. So we are broadly on target to achieve the 11 million CIP that's in our forecast. As we said before, we're continuing to drive that program to see what else we can move and accelerate and get out of that in this year. And then just in terms of some of our big areas of spend around bank and agency. So again, we're starting to really see in agency the impact of the focus on that and the recruitment efforts that we've made. So our average per monthly spend on agency is now about £200,000 a month less than it was last year. So that's an enormous achievement. In terms of bank, again, we've had some more focus on that. What we're seeing now is that bank spend is about the same as it was this time last year. And what that tells us is we would expect if the number of hours of bank usage remained the same, we'd still expect it to be higher because it's driven by our pay rates, and our pay rates obviously increase every year. So that spend leveling off and hitting the same levels as last year tells us that the amount of bank usage that we're having is reducing, and we expect to see that trajectory continue in much the same way as agency has over the past years. Bank has just lagged behind a little bit more. So that's the summary. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sandy. That's really helpful. Just a couple of comments from me, then I'll open up for questions. So where we are in terms of our deficit gap or forecast deficit, I do think there is work that could be done on bank spend in particular. I think the agency pressures that you brought to bear are really paying fruit. So congratulations to clinical teams and clinical leaders around that, because that's always difficult. But I'm surprised that the bank contracting, particularly in the more senior medical space, is not the concept I'm used to. So I'd really be interested in, is that really required at the levels it is at? I think that is an area that we perhaps as a board not focused on. I pay tribute to Marina and Miriam and colleagues who've been looking at the number of PAs in various underutilised areas of medical practice, and the reduction that's already happened through the scrutiny group on that is impressive, and there is more to come. I know that the challenges that we're facing are not unique. I sit on another board where they are exactly the same in terms of financial pressures, but I am concerned about the potential for quite significant cost increases in drugs, which will impact us in our last quarter. And I just want it noted that the Department of Health, unlike any Department of Health I've ever worked with, has no winter contingency funding, and therefore nor do we. So, which is why I asked the question about vaccination of staff as much as anything. So I do think at this stage in the financial year, we have to be very clear that we are forecasting a deficit. I would commend the people leading various SIP programs, because it's a very challenging SIP agenda, as we've said at the board. And I know Nigel and the Finance Committee have been really pushing very hard in that space. So I think very well done for the cash out element of that already. As we plan for next year, I do think we need to understand what elements of both SIP and indeed cost savings we're going to maximise next year, because we've started this year, but the real benefit comes next year. Those are my comments. I'll open them up. Can we just take comments first, then come back to you, Jackie?
Okay.
Anyone else with comments to make? Tim?
I just think for clarity, it would be useful to hear what the current, it's in the papers, but just to hear what the current overspend is, or deficit, and what we're forecasting at the moment for year end, but also where, with the additional SIP and the additional planning, we think we're likely to end up, because that's different to what we're forecasting in the finance papers, because there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, which I'm very aware of. But I think it'd just be helpful to be explicit about that.
So you want to know the unknown unknowns as well as the known unknowns?
No, it's just a
very reasonable question.
I just want to know where we are now and what we're forecasting, just so that we're all aware of those numbers.
I also want to just mention briefly, I forgot to say congratulations on the run rate, because looking at previous board papers, we haven't had this level of detailed control on run rate monthly. And that's a huge amount of work that's been done to get to that point across the organisation, not just in the finance team, but and I don't think we quite realised how little grip had been on the run rate until relatively recently. So that's really helpful. Jackie, back to you to answer both Tim's questions, the more important than my comments.
So just to pull it out explicitly, so the year-end forecast position is a deficit 15.2 million. The year-to-date deficit position is 7.6 million. We have in train approximately £5 million worth of additional actions over and above the CIP that we expect to ameliorate that position by the end of the year. So if all of those do what we have the impact that we want them to have, and we don't have any negative impacts on our forecast, then it's likely we could land at around a 10 million. However, I must emphasise, you'll see also in the paper, there are significant risks to that position as well. So, and that's really why we're maintaining the forecast position as it is at the moment. It's to recognise that there are some opportunities and risks that have yet to crystallise, and until we've got a level of certainty about which way those are going to go, we're trying to maintain a conservative position in terms of our forecasting. And that reflects a little bit on what you said, Chair, about drugs. We are conscious of what happens with drugs. It is a huge pressure for us. We are looking, when we do our forecasting, we do look at what's happened in prior years. We do know that the last quarter of the year, we see an uptake and an uptick in all of these costs, and they are built in as far as we can calculate. They are built into our forecasting. So we are being conservative in our forecasting to try and mitigate against some of those risks. They're described there, there are risks around the run rate and tertiary. So tertiary is one big area where Oliver, I know, and the team have done a huge amount of work in terms of trying to control our planned expenditure in those areas. But a huge portion of our tertiary spend is largely demand driven and unexpected. And I think the other area of demand growth, which is difficult to determine, is in the area of packages of care for some of our social care users. So our forecast is based on what we know is coming through the pipeline and some understandings there. But at any point in time, you could have a service user drops in who absolutely needs a massive, detailed and comprehensive package of care put around them, and we have no choice but to do that. So I would say, please be aware there are still massive risks.
I think that's really, really helpful, because I think people need to understand that that package of care could be £1.5 million.
Yes.
And it's just really important that we understand that that's the kind of thing that we are talking about and trying to work around. So thank you very much. And of course, as has been alluded to, we have winter, we have levels of vaccination amongst the population and amongst our own staff. And those are all potential cost pressures. So thank you very much for your work on this.
And if I could just address the bank question. Yes. So I think what we're seeing on the bank is we're starting to see the results of a sustained period of scrutiny, same way we did with agency. You work on it for 6 to 8 months before it actually starts to come out the other end. I think when you talk about the level of bank spend with some of our senior professionals, what we want to aim at, as in any system, is that you use your bank to fill unexpected gaps. What we are doing is we are using our bank to fill known gaps and that we haven't been able to bridge the planning gap for. And I think one of the big advancements that we are in the process of making at the moment is being much more robust in terms of the systems that we use to manage our rotas. And once that infrastructure has fully developed and is much more robust, our ability to get that granular grip and control over it will be enhanced. What I would say is happening at the moment is a lot of manual intervention by individuals at the coalface, literally reviewing spreadsheets and timesheets and what have you to try and pull that stuff out. But as our systems mature, our ability to drive that forward will also increase.
Okay, thank you, really helpful. Charlie, then Sheila, then
Mine's brief, and like Wendy, I do welcome and applaud your ability to do monthly run rates. My question is around, do you think there's an opportunity for us to use this year's monthly run rates to give insights into consequent years, or say next year, to provide useful insights, so that a retrospective monthly run rate, which is what we look at the moment, becomes a prospective, almost a forecast of what we may expect over the next one, even if it's the next 1 month, but the next 1 or 2 months? Do you think that's within the art of the possible with the data that you have?
That's something we already do as part of our financial modelling. So you'll see we do prior year comparisons, and we use prior year's run rates to tell us that. So we might not explicitly do prior year run rate month by month against one another, but that forms part of the analysis that we as a finance team carry out, and the work that we do with the care groups in terms of managing the budget. So we look at how does you spend against your budget, but actually how does it compare to last year as well, because they're 2 different metrics. So we're constantly doing that triangulation, and that looking at last year's run rates and the trends in that is what helps to inform our forecast going forward.
That's very useful to know. Thank you.
Sheila?
I'll be quick, Chair.
Yes, very fine.
Just picking up on winter planning again, what the chair said, and I've never been in a situation in any organisation where winter planning hasn't been funded. I suppose that strategic financial view going forward, say assuming we didn't get additional funding for winter, how will that map out for us? How will we plan?
So I think where we've struggled, and we've had this conversation at our session yesterday, I think where fundamentally we struggle is planning our services for their day-to-day operational basis that sits inside a financial envelope. And a lot of that is to do with skills, a lot of that is to do with some of the infrastructure that I just mentioned, and some of the data that's required to do that. So what I think we have is a situation where we are running services, and we are the size of our services is designed to meet the demand as we see it. Whereas what we need to do is we need to put our services inside the financial envelope. And when we do that, they're exactly the kind of considerations that we need to make. So if I give you an example, in many areas, what you'll have is you decide that you need 5 members of staff to run a team. Now, if you need 5 members of staff in that team every single day, actually you need 6 members of staff in the team, because at any point in time, there's likely to be 1 member of staff off. What we have done is we have planned for 5. So every time we have those gaps, which we should be able to anticipate and actually do, our budget hasn't quite matched that. So this is where some of that bank spend comes in, is that our budgets don't take account of sickness, annual leave, and all of those things that are absolutely plannable for. And that's where I think when we do our planning for 25, 26, we absolutely have to have that laser-like focus on making sure that our services are appropriately plan how we budget, particularly in terms of headcount. And I think that's where probably we've got some of those, that's where the run rate has been particularly difficult to reduce, because our daily run rate is just set up in such a way that it's higher than our budget, and we have to address that for next year.
Maria?
Yeah, just to come back on the, I'll be quick as well, but come back on the bank point as well. There's an additional issue in terms of reducing our costs this year, which Jackie is aware of, and that's historically, because the bank has been used to fill known gaps. We do have some people that actually, despite having a written contract that says it's bank, if they're a bank worker and therefore we have no obligation, actually they do have continuity of employment. So some of those issues do need to be unpicked and resolved. And I just wanted the board to be aware of that we can only bring the bank spend down so far until we've resolved that particular question. Thank you.
Marina?
I just wanted to say, in terms of your question about senior doctors, the problem we have is that there's no prospective cover in the consultant contract, and therefore, all the leave, just want to be clear, there's only 2 options: to bring in the locum or to have our own doctors do the bank on call. This is on call. A locum provides day work and half the rate on call. Our doctors provide on call, hence the very high salaries. It is the bank on call cover. For leave.
Good point, Marina.
Thank you.
None of this is me to amaze me. The contract for medics on. Yeah, but it is a piece of work that you're engaged in, so thank you. And I know it's going to take time to unravel, so but that's really helpful to be clear. So I just want to remind the board that when we talk about tertiary spend and packages of care, we're talking about patients and people, and these are people with real clinical needs. And so the example that Oliver gave us at the last board around complex patient requiring care is in Manchester, in Christie, £600,000 worth of individual care. Or there isn't a doctor in the world that's not going to offer that care. So I think we have to understand that the ebb and flow of our costs are difficult to interpret and manage at times. But I think from the board's perspective, we need to have absolute laser focus on our forecasting. Now, I know the way in which we talk about forecasting is always the risk, but I think in terms of the way this is often interpreted by social media and the media, the Isle of Man, I think what we're saying is that with mitigation, we're looking at around 10 million. I think that's a really important message. So we didn't get hammered on you're not doing the mitigations bit, because actually what we want to concentrate on is what is this gap? How can we minimise it? And where are we absolutely at the end point? And just to make sure that it's absolutely clear in the minutes of this meeting, the list of options that were published, not by us, were what our board had said were unacceptable changes to our investment. And indeed, Comin has also rejected them, which is good that we're all thinking the same way. I do think we have to ask the exec team to go back and look again at what else there is that we can do to bring in a balanced budget, because we can't just sit back in month 8 and say, this is our forecast, we're done. Partly because of the unforeseen risks that are out there, but also because we have committed to being a board that has a balanced budget. So I think we will ask our exec colleagues to continue to do this work and bring this back.
And if I could, Chair, just to be explicit, I can absolutely assure the board that we are not aiming at our forecast. And all of the action that's happening throughout the organisation is aiming on getting as close to balance as we possibly can. So we're not going to stop just because we've reached a magic number that's written in the management accounts.
That's really important for us to minute that. So thank you very much indeed. Any other comments for Jackie? Thank you. I've had no other items of any other business brought to my attention, and we will of course answer any written submissions from the public. I'm sorry, Mr. Mann, we don't take oral questions at the board in public. That is not policy here. We take written questions.
With all due respect, I've only just received the replies from the last meeting this morning, which is why I didn't put any written questions in. I have one small issue which I feel will be a benefit to everybody if I can be allowed to ask one question. We always used to have
you, Mr. Mann, we will make an exception and we'll listen to your question. We may not be able to answer it at this meeting, but please go ahead.
I can assure you it's well worth it. On the back of what Mr. Radford was saying on his frailty report, I'm in that category. When you reach the golden age of 66 and draw a pension, the first thing you're told when you go to the dentist is you no longer have to pay. When you go to your pharmacy, you no longer have to pay. Worse still, if you're like me and you say, well, I'd like to carry on paying, you have no scheme to take voluntary payments. The question I would like to put to the board is for you to consider immediately a scheme for voluntary payments. I'm quite happy to carry on paying my dentist. I'm quite happy to carry on paying the 70 odd pounds worth of pharmacy things that I get every so many weeks. And I'm sure there's plenty of more people like me. You won't need anything from government to introduce your scheme. You simply need a bank account and a means of paying. If I go to the dentist and say I want to pay, that money just goes in. They say they can't take it. If I go to the pharmacy, it goes into the profits of the pharmacy. There's no benefit in me paying. I don't want to use private medicine, but I'm quite happy to pay the 10 minutes of Dr. Ellis's hourly rate when he sees me. Like I've always been happy to pay the 70-odd pound when I go to the dentist. Now, why can't I voluntarily continue to do that? That's my only question. Could you please introduce an immediate scheme of voluntary payments for your car parks at the doors of your hospital? People will give you the money you're looking for. It may only be a percentage of the overall money you want from government, but if people are happy to give it to you, why not have the scheme for them to be able to do so?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very well made points, and many of them are under active consideration. You'll be glad to know, but we'll take further interest in them as we discuss the ongoing financial challenges for Manx Care. But thank you very much. Any other comments? So thank you very much, everyone. I'm sorry the room is so hot. One day I will actually bring a screwdriver and unlock the windows myself, but we're trying to cool it down. Thank you, Kate.